So I was looking at the polls this morning to determine what poll I wanted to talk about in today's video, and there aren't many important ones, I don't think, but there was one out of Oklahoma that I thought was quite interesting, and it shows Kamala Harris losing by 16 points with 40% of the vote to Donald Trump's 56. Now, most people might look at that and say, well, big deal, Donald Trump is dominating in a red state, and that is true, but when you realize that Joe Biden got 32% of the vote in the last election in Oklahoma, Kamala Harris getting 40% of the vote is a significant increase. So yes, that thumbnail that I have at the beginning, that's not a lie. This would be an 8% increase in the Democratic vote, and this would actually be the best Democratic result since Bill Clinton ran in the state for re-election in 1996. He didn't win the state. He lost by 8, but he got 40% as well. So I wanted to look at this poll and delve into it and find out a little bit more about it. And oh boy, I got a lot more than I expected. They don't have any crosstabs, so we really can't tell if the poll is legit or not. But we can look at the polling firm because honestly, they're kind of questionable, and we have to really ask ourselves the goal of this poll. Why were they doing this poll? What was the main reason behind it? So we're going to go into the company's website and kind of show you how they do things, and then why would they release a poll like this if they're definitely clearly on the Republican side? Let's go ahead and go into their company website. So we're now in the Sooner Poll company website, and you can see this is the poll that we're talking about. We'll come to that in a second. But as you can see here, it says nearly 60% think Joe Biden was involved in son's illegal influence peddling. Okay, if that's the kind of poll you're doing, I mean, what are you going to bring up? Vince Foster's Solyndra, Pizzagate? I mean, are you going to hit the old classics again? I mean, who's polling? Who's like really legitimately polling on Hunter Biden and making that the headline of their poll? That's absolutely ridiculous. Then you get this picture right here. Oklahomans believe Biden is too old, doubt his mental fitness, which could be true, but look at like the picture that they use and everything like that. It's just, you can tell this is a Republican polling firm. Now here is the Trump poll, and looking at the headline, which is one of the craziest headlines I've seen. Trump leads Harris by 16 points. Between 12 and 73% of Harris voters disapprove of her views. Okay, so you're basically saying between nobody and everybody disagrees with Harris's views. Well, no kidding. This is a two-party system, so we're not going to agree with our candidates on everything, right? I mean, I support certain candidates in the past, and I agree with the majority of their stuff, but I don't agree with everything. I don't think there's been a single candidate I've agreed with on any issue. So this headline, why they would put this up, makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. I think they're trying to make it look like that the Harris supporters are wishy-washy or something like that. Again, another thing, a Republican push. With that being said, I want to talk about that word, which is push. And what we're going to see here is a push poll. Maybe not to the extreme that we saw in South Carolina in 2000 with the Bush campaign against McCain. Just look that up. That's a whole nother story for a whole nother day. But there are things being pushed in this poll that the goal of a push poll is to make people go against the candidate by attaching certain things to them. So for example, if I called up and I said, well, John, if you found out John Smith had murdered his children, would you be more or less likely to vote for him? Okay, these are push polls. Now, of course, that's an extreme, but we're going to get into this poll and show why it is a push poll. So let's go down and look at the questions they ask. Now, they ask like a horse race question, who are you going to support, Kamala Harris, so on and so forth. We don't have any of the data, we don't have any of the crosstabs, we don't have the questionnaire or anything like that, so we can't really delve a lot into it, but they do divulge some questions that shows that this is an absolute push poll. So, for example, the first question they ask, and they ask this only to Harris voters, right? They only ask this to Harris voters. So if you ask, if you were somebody who said that you were a Trump supporter, or maybe you didn't know, or you supported a third-party candidate, they didn't ask you this question. But they admittedly say here, filter only Harris voters. So this is only going to the Harris voters. They ask this question: do you approve or disapprove of eliminating the federal agency responsible for deportation of immigrants in the country illegally? Now, what agency is this? You know, give us an agency, give us a name. This could be anything. I don't know what an agency or the federal agency is. I don't know what that is. Give us more information. But it's obviously meant to be there to push people in that direction. Say, do you support illegal immigrants? You're a Harris supporter. Do you support them? And then they, of course, say they somewhat disapprove and strongly disapprove. Okay, it's a pretty obvious answer. But the next question, I think, is even more push-pull-y. So again, filtered only for Kamala Harris supporters. Do you approve or disapprove a $5 trillion tax increase on businesses, unrealized capital gains, which would be the nation's largest tax increase during peacetime? Okay, so we don't know this would be the largest tax increase. We don't know anything about this proposal. This is just throwing stuff out there saying, hey, again, Kamala Harris people, do you want these huge taxes? Are you sure you want? And basically the whole idea of this poll, in this question first and foremost, let me get to this. It's interjecting their beliefs of what things would be. So they're saying they believe it would be the largest tax increase during peacetime. That's their belief. That's their thought. They're not using any data or statistics to make this point made. They're just giving their thought about this. So that in and of itself is just kind of horseshit at face value. But even with that being the case, when they asked Kamala Harris supporters, it kind of backfired because a lot of them say, yeah, they'd strongly approve that, and they'd somewhat approve that as well. So I think they were trying to maybe make it go the other way, but it didn't. But these are the push-pull ideas. You ask people questions that they are going to have a less desirable interest in the candidate that they're saying that they are supporting. So this is it. Now, the question you have to ask yourself is, why did Sooner Poll decide to release this poll? Or at least divulge the information that they gave? Because this information that they give shows that it is purely a push poll. It's purely a push poll. Again, not to the extent of 2000 poll against John McCain by the Bush campaign, not to that extent. But it's a push poll nonetheless. And when you release the results and you show that it's 56-40, people like me who just have a deep interest in the history of political campaigns, I realize that's the highest, that's a pretty damn high percent for Democrats in the state of Oklahoma. And then the question is, if their methodology is correct, and before they got into the push-pull-y type of stuff, if the first question they asked was, how likely are you to vote, how interested are you to vote, and who you're going to vote for, if those were the three before they got into the push-pull question, and the methodology, let's say, is sound, which it isn't going to be, by the way. So according to this, about the poll, they question 323 likely voters. Now, they were selected random. It is a margin of error of 5.45%, which could mean Kamala Harris could even have more of the vote for all we know. But here's the thing. If it's a margin of error of 5.45%, that means that the lowest she can get, according to this poll, would still be higher than what Joe Biden got in the last election. So if we're seeing even a 4% change or 4% swing for Kamala Harris in Oklahoma, what are we going to see in the swing states? What are we going to see in other states that maybe people aren't really focusing on, right? I don't take much credence in this poll. I look at it, I'm like, I don't know. It looks like it was there purely to be a push poll. But the question still remains, why would you release a poll where you say Kamala Harris is doing better than any other Democratic candidate since 1996 and Bill Clinton? And you notice they don't talk about that in this poll. They don't show that Kamala Harris is doing better than almost every other Democratic candidate. I think Bill Clinton got under 40% in 1992, okay? And Michael Dukakis got 41%, I think, and this is when the state was a little bit more Democratic. So why would you divulge that information? I don't know. But I wanted to show you this poll today because I think it is a funny poll that actually I think they were trying to show one thing, but it had the adverse effect and really show them as being a bad polling firm, hardly polling anybody, to come up with a result that actually looks better for Democrats than I think they expected, even though they're definitely trying to push poll people, which they actually, give you the questions that they were trying to push people on. All right, well, that's it for today. Thank you very much. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.